So welcome to the regular meeting of the Design Review Board on December 6, 2022. This meeting is called to order. So I'll request staff to call the roll for members who are present and those who are not.
Sorry, I just want to get that message off of the Zoom. Board member Alexin.
Here.
Member Kent. Here. Member Summers.
Here.
Vice Chair Kowalski.
Here.
Chair Reggie.
Here.
And Board Member Blaney.
Here.
All right.
Thank you. Next, we'll move to the meeting procedures. I'd like to ask staff to address how public comment will work this evening.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. In addition to accepting written comments, staff is accepting public comments in person at City Hall or over the telephone or through Zoom. Members of the public are invited to participate via conference call at the following phone number: 669-444-9171. And the meeting ID is 831-0781-8748#. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide comments, please press *9 when the chair opens the public comment period for the item you'd like to speak on. This will virtually raise your hand. Once it's your turn, you hear a notification that the host is inviting you to participate. At that time, please press *6 to unmute yourself. You can then speak to introduce yourself and you'll be allotted up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'll now describe the meeting procedures. We will begin with the staff report for each item, followed by the applicant's presentation. Members of the public will then be invited to speak. Community members on the conference call can speak when they receive the notification, as Jeff just described, when they've been unmuted. Comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes each. The board will have the opportunity to ask questions of staff or the public after each segment, and then we'll close the public hearing and bring the matter back to the board for discussion. And now on urgent communication, anyone with an urgent communication item on a topic not on the agenda may address the board at this time. Please know that anything raised has not been noticed or agendized, so there will be no discussion on these items at this time.
And so again, to comment on Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature. If commenting by phone, please press *9. Once you hear a notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6. We have a number of attendees through Zoom, but I am not seeing anybody raising their hand. And looks like nobody in City Hall either.
Okay, then we'll keep going on to the consent calendar. It has one item, the meeting minutes from the November 8th, 2022 Design Review Board meeting. Are there any comments from the public on this item for the consent calendar?
I should really get a recording of this. So again, to comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. If commenting by phone, please press *9. Once you hear yourself invited to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. Seeing none.
Okay. Is anyone prepared to make a motion on the board?
I have a change. Larry Paul was listed as present and absent. I think we need to correct that.
Yes, thank you. Vice Chair Kowalski noted that, and so the minutes in front of you have been corrected.
Okay, not the ones in front of me.
Oh, really? Okay,
There you go.
that will be corrected then. Thank you.
Okay,
Therefore, I'd like to move to accept the minutes as submitted.
and I forgot to ask this, but can you announce your name prior to your
Member
motion?
Kent would like to move that the minutes are accepted as submitted.
And then the second,
I'll second member Alexin.
is there any discussion? Okay, then let's move to a vote.
All right, Board Member Alexin,
Aye.
Member Kent,
Aye.
Member Summers,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kowalski,
Aye.
and Chair Reggie.
I'll abstain. Because I wasn't here for the meeting.
Gotcha.
So those are approved. And now we'll move on to the action items on the agenda tonight. Can we start with the staff report?
Absolutely. So this will be an uncharacteristically brief staff report because I really want to let the applicant provide the brunt of the presentation, and given that it's conceptual design review. But just a brief description. So it's a major remodeling of the existing wildcare facilities. They're essentially demolishing just about all the facilities on site except for the historical Terwilliger building. Yeah, I think with that, I think it would be best really just to let the applicant provide the presentation.
Does the board have any questions of staff? Okay. Then would the applicant like to provide a presentation?
Thank you.
Yes.
So is this, we introduce ourselves and, okay, like per usual. Hi, I'm Cheryl Lentini, one of the architects on the project, and with me is
Hi, I'm Ellen Weisel. I'm the executive director.
Anne. And I'm Jessica Fairchild. And we do have a presentation for you tonight, and I want to thank you for this opportunity to present the Wildcare project to all of you. It's been a long journey to get to this point, and I think we're all really excited about the project and looking forward to hearing your feedback. So to start, what we're going to cover tonight is we're going to start with, is this something that you
Yeah, just you want to hit
we
say
advance
next?
it, or do you have to?
I
Fine.
have to press this button.
Okay. So we're gonna start with a brief introduction of, Wildcare and sort of how we got to this point and making the decision to stay at the Albert Park site. And then I'm gonna provide some site overview and context because this is a very challenging site. There are many, many constraints that you'll see and you've probably looked at already in your packet. And then Jessica's going to go through the design in more detail, and then we can open it up to any questions you have as you've listened to our presentation. All right, so to start with the introduction, Wildcare's history and mission. So we can go to the next slide.
Hi, good evening. The first thing I want to do is thank all of you for volunteering, because as I was explaining to Sharon earlier, I had parents who did this and used to leave at night to go be town moderators and do this kind of work. And we're really grateful because I know, you don't get paid a lot of money to come here this evening. So thank you very much for your time. So first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to introduce who's in the audience. So we have wonderful staff here. We have some volunteers, we have board members, and on the phone, I think through Zoom, we have a lot of those folks as well. So we're all really excited. This is a big night for Wildcare. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the organization. Here you have the history. Big thank you to our marketing communications person, Allison, who helped put these together. So 1954, Marin Junior Museum. And this is actually when the parish hall, which we are keeping, it is historic, arrived at Wildcare. And this is a great photo from 1954. So you see the photos of the California Center for Wildlife, 1974 and 1980. A lot of folks who come visit us know, remember Teddy the bear, who used to be at Wildcare. So if you ever visited back when you were a kid or your parents visited. And then one of the things we like to say is this is a picture of a seal, obviously. And the Marine Mammal Center was actually started at Wildcare. In little baby pools. And we love our relationship with Marine Mammal Center, and we're going to talk about that a little later. And then 1974, the Terwilliger Nature Education Center. And one of the things that we find is amazing is how many people were impacted by the work of Mrs. Terwilliger and who remember Wildcare and have so much love for our site. And that's part of the reason why we realized, and as we go through this design today, we own this location. This is ours, and really felt like staying here. We're a huge part of this community. So 2022, here we are today. This is what we're calling our campaign. We need to raise $20 million to build this building. That's the cost at this point, and we've done a lot of work on that number. We've started a quiet phase of a capital campaign, and you'll be hearing more about that later. So one of the things that I really wanted to make sure, you can do the next slide, please. Yeah. Thank you. Is I really wanted to touch on what makes WildCare special. And I was, I do a lot of reading as a nonprofit executive. And one of the things that I read recently was something about nonprofits. And nonprofits turn cities into communities and residents into neighbors. They provide jobs, they provide volunteer opportunities, and they make our communities stronger. And we really feel like that's part of what we give to this community and the role we play. So I just wanted to make sure that all of you, I know some of you have probably taken your kids to WildCare. We've come to your schools. You've maybe visited our location at Albert Park. So we're the only open admission wildlife hospital, and we provide all wildlife medicine in Marin County and beyond. We treat over 3,500 animals a year in our wildlife hospital. All but 600 of those come through our front gates. We get about 600 a year through our partnership with Marin Humane. Our hotline's incredible. It provides the public, well beyond the Bay Area, information and guidance on wildlife habitat and resources. And those are over 15,000 phone calls a year. And that number went up by 15% during COVID and post-COVID. So those are people calling us with wildlife emergencies, asking us questions, all free to the public. And then our advocacy, we're a voice for wildlife. And we do a lot of that work in Northern California. Okay, Jeff. So our role in Bay Area education, we provide nature education to schools. Important resources are relied upon by our community, connecting and teaching 35,000 adults and children a year. We run summer camps, we run nature hikes, we do family programs, we offer bilingual language offerings, and again, an advocacy for wildlife and teaching children to love nature. And then what this is, we see this as a community investment. The new Wildlife Hospital will finally support WildCare's extraordinary capabilities and the work we do on the front lines of wildlife medicine. The hospital will continue to serve as a training ground for aspiring biologists, researchers, veterinary technicians, and veterinarians. WildCare's mission of advocating for wildlife for a sustainable world while advancing the field of wildlife veterinary medicine in partnership with institutions like UC Davis. And WildCare's elevated education programs will continue to bring high quality environmental education to communities in need, providing the nature-based experiential learning that nurtures the environmental stewards of tomorrow. We provide volunteer opportunities for adults and teens. We always love to tell people that we teach teens how to do laundry, do dishes, mop. Our staff's laughing at this. We often have teens come in who don't know which side of the broom to hold. Some of our volunteers are here and they're doing that work. We're a community center for wildlife and environmental education, and we partner with other nonprofits all over the Bay Area. So many of our programs are offered to schools and children through scholarships, free transportation, and during the summer we run a nature education program for families in the canal, and that's free, and that's getting people out hiking into the environment. So why this? As we said, Mrs. T used to say, teach children to love nature. People take care of what they love. And we really believe that we are a huge part of this community. We want to stay here. We want our home to be here. And this is a legacy project for WildCare. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl and Jessica, who have been our amazing partners. A decade we've been at this to build a new facility. So thank you very much to Cheryl and Jessica and all the work that they've done on this project.
Thanks,
Okay.
Ellen.
Yep.
Okay, so back to the drivers and the need. And I think everything that Ellen just said, it's kind of miraculous that they've been delivering those kinds of services out of their location. And for those of you who may have stopped by or seen it, it's in dire need of replacement. The facilities are outdated, the infrastructure is decaying. It flooded last year very badly. And it's completely undersized, and it's below standards, below licensing guidelines, below code. It's not meeting code. I mean, there's so many issues. And, as as we got started on this, we actually did look at just raising the entire site. But you'll see as I go forward and kind of explain some of these constraints that there's a lot we actually are having to work with on the property. So, and Jeff, you can go to the next slide. So I want to kind of go into that and start with the context that we're working in on this property. This property, as you know, it's not just kind of sitting in the context of a single neighborhood. It's basically got kind of three very different contexts surrounding the property. So on the north side, we've got obviously the creek and all of Albert Park and all of the different functions that happen across the street. Very community oriented, open fields, lots of activity. To the east, it's a very industrial area, a lot of warehouses, you know, two-story buildings, you know, a very industrial feel. And then on the west and south, we've got residential neighborhood, some two-story, a couple of single-story residences next to the property. So that's, you know, kind of our starting challenge in terms of context is which context to respond to, how do we respond to all of these different phases of the site as we started the design process. So if you want to. These are just some of the views, as many of you I know the property, just kind of looking in different directions. So I think, Jeff, we can just kind of scroll through these. But you can kind of see what the different faces of the site look like, the condition of the creek right now and how overgrown it's been. And some of the property itself, to actually see some of these views of the exterior where you're looking at where the caging is and against the fencing. Some of the things we found when we surveyed the property are that, in fact, the property is built out over property lines, certainly over setbacks. You know, there's a lot of things that we really needed to correct as part of this process as well. So one of the first things we're dealing with is a 25-foot creek setback, and that intrudes about 17 feet onto the property, whereas the front setback would have been 10 feet. We kind of got an extra 7 feet. We're even beyond that in order to meet the creek setback requirement. We also are in a floodplain. In this case, the base flood elevation we're working with is 11 feet. The current property elevation varies between about 7.5 to 9.5 feet. So you can see that that's quite a delta that we need to accommodate. And we need to raise the finished floor elevation above that base flood elevation by a foot. And then we continue with the constraints. I think as Ellen mentioned, we do have a historic structure. When we started this process, we did start with a scheme to completely demolish the site. And we went for a pre-application review with staff. And one of the things that they alerted us to is that we really needed to evaluate the existing historic structures and find out if they have significance. And in fact, the main structure is significant. And Jessica will explain more about that, you know, as we go through the design. We also have a non-compliant pedestrian bridge crossing the creek. No accessible route of travel, and we're on expansive soils. So I don't know how much more we could load onto the project. And it's a very, very tight site in terms of trying to fit the program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica so she can explain how, after many, many, many options were developed, we've actually arrived at a design that everyone likes.
Okay. So as Cheryl mentioned, the site is incredibly tight. Really what we're doing here is a right fit for WildCare's program. And much of the program really is dictated by developing spaces that are sized to accommodate the regulatory requirements. There, as Cheryl said, a lot of this is under code requirements for what they're licensed to be doing. So in terms of the site itself, basically color's not showing up too well on that, but the historic structure is in the middle of the site. And what we're proposing to do is, in saving this building, we're planning on moving it forward on the site and really wrapping the new building around the back of it. The building was built in, and I'm sure you had this in your packet, but the building was built in 1879 as the parish hall for St. John's Church. And it was moved to, as Ellen said, to the WildCare site. So it has a lot of character. It's a Carpenter Gothic style building, which is not very common in California. So that's kind of fun. Uh, But anyway, so we've really worked around keeping this building and sort of reevaluating the functional uses on the site. We're moving the bridge from its current location that you saw on the previous slide to the west. Part of the reason for that is exactly what Cheryl was talking about, which is we need to raise the level of the new buildings and the historic building to the correct flood elevation, and we don't have accessible access, but we need to. And the grade is slightly higher on that side of the street. So we're sort of sliding it down to the west. Also, where it's currently crossing is right almost into the driveway for the maintenance of the ball field. So it's not a great location in terms of safety either. Do you want to go to the next one? So this is basically the first floor, and I'm going to go pretty quickly through the floor plans, and I'm sorry the color is not showing up that well, but hopefully it's in your packet. Because the different sort of functions are color coded on here. But basically one of our goals was to currently, if you've been to the site, everybody comes through the Ambassador Courtyard. There's a lot of overlap in terms of functions. Wildcare is doing the hospital sort of rehab. So somebody could be bringing in a little broken bird. And there's a lot of educational activities, plus people just come to visit the ambassador animals as well. And right now, all of that is sort of funneling through that courtyard space. So in looking at this plan, one of the goals was to try to clean up sort of the circulation patterns and separate that out a little bit. So you come across the bridge and you'll come directly in front of you would be the lobby for the building, which would be where the hospital is. If you were only going to the ambassador courtyard, you would just directly go over to if you're coming that direction, to your left. And the ambassador courtyard is going to be relocated onto the east side of the site. And then the Terwilliger Hall, which is the historic piece of the building, which is currently used for educational classes and will still be used for educational classes, is, as I said, sort of pushed forward on the site and becomes sort of front and center on the site. Can you go to the next, please? So then on the first floor, I'm sorry, I went backwards a little bit, but on the first floor, there's the educational facilities, there's the admin, and then there's some common spaces, kitchen and storage. Going up to the second floor is the majority of the hospital function. So this is really all hospital function. And the part that is the dark green in your packet is the interior spaces. It doesn't read that well on the slide here, but so the back of it is the interior space. And what we've done is essentially tried to, as we go up through the building, separate away from that historic building, so that the historic building does have connections on the first floor, but as we move up, we're sort of pulling back. So we're not encroaching on that building and we're giving it some space. The two wings that you see here going to the north and also to the east are outdoor caging for the hospital animals. And those are basically exterior caging. So it's on the roof of the level below. And that is for the rehabilitation animals. One of the things that's crucial to the licensing and function of the wildlife hospital is the separation of these releasable animals from public view. The animals need to be protected from, the distraction, the disturbances of people going by, so that they can rehabilitate in order to be released. So we're providing a screening, which is that red line that runs around the outside, so that those animals, not only are they in the hospital caging, but they're also screened from public view. Going up to the next floor. Then on the top floor, basically this is all hospital caging. So this is really, even though it's a third floor, it's really pretty much outdoor space. And so the light green is all the additional hospital caging. There's some mechanical spaces. There is a mechanical outdoor space on the northwest corner that's separated from the hospital caging by the stairs, the volume of the stairs again, so the animals aren't disturbed. This level is high enough that there isn't any additional screening. The animals are up away from sort of public view. One of the things that you can start to see on this floor plan is solar panels that are happening above the caging on the level below, which is the little squares that you see on the top right of the screen there. So basically on top of this outdoor caging, both on the second floor and on top of this floor that we're looking at now will be solar panels. And another goal, obviously, is to be as sustainable as possible, because that is so important for WildCare as an organization and just in general, I think. So these sections really, I think, represent and illustrate this idea of sort of separating the historic building from the new, and having that new building respect sort of the volume of the historic building. So on the lower north-south section, you can see the historic building on the right. What's sort of diagrammed in the middle there is actually a courtyard space that happens on the first floor. Some of the offices look into that courtyard. It also allows for the historic building's original windows to get natural light so that we're not blocking those windows on the back. And then again, it just pulls the new portion back away a little bit from that building. On the other section on the top, we're looking through the historic building, through the lobby, which is 1 story, and then to the admin space with the hospital caging above. And again, you can see that sort of separation with just that 1 lower level. The screening that I mentioned before earlier is a really important element to the function of the hospital. And we're really embracing that as a design element. The screening patterns and shape are going to echo the shapes and forms of the historic Carpenter Gothic building. And they're going to have reference to the organic forms of the woodworking on that building. The organic forms are also obviously very appropriate for the animals that are being protected behind the screening. So the next slide, this shows the materials, sort of the overall building materials. The first thing that is getting passed around there is actually the caging for the hospital animals on the upper level. It's not really going to be that visible because again, it's going to be behind this screening, but you will see a little of it up on the top. The rest of the building materials, let's see. So the bridge and the donor wall, which is directly adjacent to the entry, are going to be Corten. That's just sort of a representation. I didn't have a piece of Corten, so. And the idea there is that that is right next to the creek and has a little bit more of that very natural sort of dark sort of ground feel to it. The historic building itself is going to be painted a creamy white color. It's currently stucco, and in the old photos, you can tell that there was siding on it. I've worked on a couple of other older buildings, and when you take off the stucco, usually the siding is underneath. So whether we can keep the siding that's there, chances are we'll pull off that siding and replace it with siding to match what is the original historic siding. Just as a note, the little image there of the other building next to the historic building color, that's actually St. Hilary, Old St. Hilary's in Tiburon, which is actually also Carpenter Gothic. So let's see. And then the new building is really envisioned to be a backdrop. And so we're looking at using CMU for that for the majority of that building for a couple of reasons. The main being just durability. There are animals in there. It's an animal hospital. And so the CMU allows us to really protect those animals from all kinds of things. And we can use that surface on both sides. So the inside of the building will actually be the CMU as well. We're looking at 2 different types of CMU, the split face, which I think gives us like a little more texture. You'll get some shadows, light and dark. We'll see the aggregate in it. And then we're using a smooth CMU sort of as a contrast so that we can articulate the back elevations a little bit more. The screening is also going to, not only is it going to sort of reflect sort of the patterns of the old building, but we're also proposing that it would reflect the old building in its color as well. So that's that sort of creamy metal finish. The caging I already mentioned, there will be fencing around quite a bit of the site. The licensing requires fencing around the ambassador animals that we're proposing. That's a wood fencing that we would just let weather. So that again has that natural feel to it. And then the solar panels, we're looking at bifacial solar panels, which will allow light to come through. And those are, again, like I said, over the caging, so that the animals that are in there, it's going to be sort of a dappled light, you know, more sort of a natural feel. Okay, you have the elevations in front of you, but this starts to show you sort of where these materials start to happen. You can see this would be the north elevation, which is facing Albert Park. And you can see right next to the entry, which is on the right, lower right, the donor wall, which is right by the entry, the core 10 of the bridge. And so that would be a core 10 wall. And like I said, sort of trying to pick up that creek feel. On the left is the fencing that would go around the ambassador animals on the east side, which would be the wood. In this, you can see how that historic building is really sort of coming front and center. And the other building is, you know, a backdrop to it. And then you can see on the right that hospital screening, which is really sort of a modern reflection of that historic building. Yeah. And then the west elevation, and then I think the south elevation as well, is where we're starting to use the concrete block to articulate the two different. So the center portion of this, for example, would be the split face, and then the two sides would be the smoother CMU. And then the east elevation, this is actually sort of a cut through the courtyard, and you can see the Terwilliger building with the new doors that we're proposing that would open up into the ambassador courtyard. And then here is the view from Albert Park. And again, you can start to see the materials a little bit clearer here. And you can also really see that when it's that building really does recede in the back of the historic building. These are just a couple of sort of sketch views, but you can see on the one on the left in particular, again, this idea that the building is wrapping around the historic building. The one on the lower right, that's the view from Mariposa. And one of the things that we've done is sort of step the building down over there. And that is this, again, there's screening back there that has that smaller scale to it. We have just a few pictures of the inside of the Terwilliger. So if you haven't been inside there, it is currently packed with stuff. And there's a loft that's been built up inside the space. The proposal is to really open that space back up and restore it. And we're hoping that under the drywall that's on the lower portions, we'll actually see all this redwood. And so that we'd be restoring that redwood. There's a couple of windows that are missing that we'll be putting back in as well. But this really becomes this sort of central, you know, really core space that can be used for education and other programmatic needs. And that's that loft on the right. So once that's removed, both of those trusses are going to be sort of more floating in the space the way that they originally were. Yeah.
And I know this is a lot, but just to kind of wrap up and sort of come back to the site, because we do have a creek that we're dealing with. And, you know, the focus here, you know, the Ambassador Courtyard is very enclosed. So it isn't something you're going to really observe much from the exterior. You really have to walk in to experience it. The ambassador animals are going to kind of wrap around that east corner of the site. And in the middle, you know, we hope to get, you know, a couple of trees. We've got a bioswale wrapping in front of the cages. It kind of does double duty of keeping the people away from the cages and from sticking their fingers in the cage. And then it'll act as our bioswale for the courtyard drainage. The rest of the planting on this project is really going to be focused on restoring the creek habitat in front of the site and really removing a lot of the invasive species and then kind of replanting, which you can see here. This is just a sample of some of the palette that our biologist has given us to work with, to really work with plants and material that are more native to the creek habitat and would be better suited than some of the invasive species that have grown up over time. So the idea being that in front of the property, at the very least, we hope to kind of restore that entire creek segment and actually just make it a more educational and interesting experience for the visitor who comes. The last thing we just want to mention again, I think it's important to understand that when it comes to lighting of this property, it's really important. Like, we don't want to light the animals at night. So we are not going to be kind of accenting or highlighting or spotlighting or lighting up the site at night. It's really going to be very subdued, basically pathway and safety lighting for people who are going to be on site at night at some time. And so really, this is like it is now. It's a dark site at night again. So because the animals really want to have as close to, nature as possible in terms of, their time there on Wildcare's property. And I think with that, there's our last view from the other angle. And sorry, it was a bit long, but that's our presentation. And please ask us any questions. We look forward to your comments.
Great, thank you. So I'm assuming there's some questions. Does anyone on the board have questions of the applicant? Go ahead.
You mentioned bioswales for the patio area. Is there going to be others around the perimeter of the property for the roof?
Yeah, so we have one, actually, the whole front corner, up on the northwest corner. We've got about 150 square feet that we've identified we need for bioswale kind of in the front. So that and the ones inside the courtyard at the moment, our civil engineer is kind of working on his revisions now. We also have the whole front is a deck. And we're looking at possibly the courtyard won't be filled paving. It might also be deck. So he's kind of still working on the calculations, but I believe we're close with the bioswale we've provided in the courtyard and at the front of the site.
And will the site be fully fenced? Except for
Yes,
it will be.
yes, and that's required.
And any rooftop equipment that's not shown on the drawings?
There's rooftop equipment where it's labeled, mechanical equipment on the north.
Southwest corner, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
On the
west.
third floor.
Yeah, and it's screened.
It's screened.
Fully
They're
screened.
screened. Okay,
Yeah.
that was going to be my next questions. And then obviously the palms and all the non-natives are going to be removed. So the other question is how much of the creek is going to be rehabbed? Because if you go right to your property line, a lot of these things are just going to migrate back in. So is
No,
there any intention to go beyond your property line?
I mean, I don't think that Wildcare can fund restoring the entire creek along Albert Park. I mean, obviously, if someone stepped up and wanted to do that, that'd be great. But yeah, I think really all we can handle is in front of the property. And I absolutely understand. Yeah, stuff is going to creep back in. So.
All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Go ahead.
Great presentation.
Great presentation. So in this picture, what is the material on the far right side? That's sort of in the shadow, like on the perpendicular to the screen. Is that the concrete,
That's the split.
the
face.
CMU?
Yeah.
Okay,
So that would be the split face CMU that just that's sort of wrapping around the corner, and then it would be glass.
Okay.
Right at the entry, and then the little court. It's split face CMU.
okay. I'm relatively new, so I don't know if we're allowed to comment yet or if it's just questions, but
Just questions.
okay. I'll save the comment for later, but I'll come back to this.
Thank you. Sharon?
I wonder if you have a site plan showing the neighbors, like where are the single family houses
Yeah.
next to the
Can we
building?
go back to the Google map view in the beginning? It's probably about 4 or 5 slides in. There you go. So on the left, on the west side of the property.
Mhm.
There is a single family home, and then I think beyond are some apartment buildings. Directly to the south, there's an empty lot, and then there's a two-story single family residence. And then there's a couple more that follow on down Mariposa. And then to the east is the Carpenters Union building and parking lot directly to the east.
And then all warehouses all
Yeah, all the way down that side of Mariposa.
Okay.
If you go to the
Yeah, you could, we could maybe look at those views. So
the next one.
next one.
So a lot of those were taken are from Mariposa. So the ones on the bottom, you can see the sort of single family, but they're two-story on the left. And then the warehouse is on the right. That street is like half and half.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I just had a quick question on funding. You mentioned 22 million, 20 million. Where, and obviously you're looking for money now. Where, how are we doing?
Great question. I'm sorry. So we are in what we call the quiet phase. We really just started fundraising at the end of the summer into early fall, and we've raised 5.6. We have a leadership gift, a match gift, and then we have full participation from our board and also from our wonderful capital campaign committee. And our goal is we'll go out, the real quiet phase in the new year. So a lot of work to do. So, yep. Thank you for asking.
Stuart?
I've got nothing.
I had a couple questions. You guys talked about the donor wall. Is that the Corten wall or the wall with the signage at the front of the site?
It's the Corten, the
Corten.
Corten wall.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about the Wild Care signage, like what material that wall is and what those
Yeah,
are?
so right now what we're showing, and maybe, I don't know, the rendering might be a good thing to be looking at, but we're really just showing, Wild Care's logo signage mounted on the front fence. And, probably metal letters or something in there. It's basically their brand, their whole brand. And it's really just gonna be mounted on the front fence. The donor wall hasn't been designed yet. Any other signage is really going to be limited to probably interpretive signage that might be on the bridge or along the deck, and that we're not at a point yet that that's been designed. It'll be designed in conjunction with the exhibits in the ambassador courtyard and whatnot.
Okay. What is the material of the front fence? Is that
That's
CMU?
no, the front fence is the wood that was in the box. And what we're hoping to do is we got quite a lot of old redwood buildings to tear down, and we're hoping, that we might be able to reclaim some of that and reuse that in some of that fencing. With any luck.
Great.
But otherwise it would, it would be wood fencing that
Okay.
would age in weather.
Okay, those were my questions.
Mhm.
Anybody else on questions? Okay. So now we're going to open the public hearing. Thank you very much. Yeah. I just want to remind anyone who speaks that you have 3 minutes, and please stick to that limit so we can get everybody's comments.
Great. So one last time to comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. If commenting by phone, please press *9. Once you hear a notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. So now's the time if anyone would like to raise your hand through Zoom or members of the public here in City Hall. Surprisingly quiet for such a large crowd.
Okay, so no one on Zoom has raised a hand either.
Oh, wait, sorry. We do have one person. Brenda Godin. You're now available to speak, Brenda.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Full disclosure, I am a longtime volunteer for Wild Care. And I just wanted to really emphasize the need for the new facility. I've been volunteering for 28 years at this facility, and it's wonderful, and the staff works incredibly hard to keep the crumbling facility together and make do for the animals that they support. And they take care of over several thousand animals a year. And I just think that they're doing an excellent job of working with the volunteers and the staff to really be thoughtful about what is necessary for the animals and for the public, because this is a treasured, literally treasured public space where people come daily with their children, with people with disabilities, with parents, families. Any day you walk into Wild Care when it's not COVID times or avian flu times, there are people there really taking in what the Wild Care team does. It's a unique facility, pretty much anywhere in California. Really, really great. And they provide services to people outside of California. I know because I'm regularly getting questions on the night phone. So they're a resource to people all across the United States and in fact into other countries from time to time. And so I think they've worked really, really hard with the design. I think it's really thoughtful. I think it will continue to evolve as we work through this process. But I just wanted to offer my support to the team on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda.
Good evening, board members. I'm Paul Cohen, PM Cohen Public Affairs, longtime San Rafael resident and active in the community. I've been a consultant with Wild Care for about 3 years now, if you can believe that, working through the possibility of alternate sites. But I just wanted to share with you that the absence of comment is not because we've been trying to sneak under the radar. It's about a year ago when we decided that this was Wild Care's home and we were going to do the investment to stay there. We've been actively doing outreach, did an open house for members of the Grosvenor Park Neighborhood Association board a year ago. We're not actually in any identified neighborhood. We're kind of close to, Picnic Valley, but there's not an active neighborhood there. So we've sort of been adopted by Grosvenor Park. More recently, as the project is entering into the entitlement phase, we held another open house for the Grosvenor Park Neighborhood Association board. We've put an article in their newsletter. And Ellen didn't mention, but she walked the entire residential and industrial neighborhood to the south, east and west of the site, inviting people to an open house. And so far, only 2 individuals have expressed interest and come by. But we're going to continue active outreach and community engagement as we move through the entitlement process. But I wanted to assure you, like I said, we're not trying to sneak this thing through. We want to be open and communicate about what Wild Care is doing and its importance to San Rafael. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm seeing no other hands online.
Okay, then we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Anyone on the board have additional comments at this time? Or- Yeah, sorry, comments.
Are we commenting now?
Yeah, we are commenting now, but before we do that, I wanted to, and then I'll get to your question. We have some, city staff has identified some specific questions they'd like us to address. So as everybody is making their comments, if you can look on page 4 and 5 and in bold, there's a few questions, just kind of give your comments on those questions and then go into additional items so that we can give some clarity to the questions that the city staff has identified as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Question?
I was just going to ask, what is the current sort of average population of animals, just for context, versus your current capacity? And then what is your planned capacity with this design of animals?
So,
Can we go back out?
yeah, you can always open the public hearing back open.
Okay,
Oh, is
we'll
that-
open the public.
Okay,
hearing
sorry.
back up
You have to open it back to the public
After,
after.
yeah,
Okay, sorry about that.
It's okay.
okay, it's okay. An important
Oh,
question.
microphone, yeah.
We have our director of animal care and our veterinarian here this evening, which is fabulous. But we serve really 3,500. Our range of animals is really within a couple hundred every year, and it has been. Even COVID, we went up a little bit during COVID, but that number stays very consistent. And I wanted to say something I didn't say before, which was, when we looked everywhere. Actually, we have spent the last, decade, we had another site, it didn't work out. We looked north, we looked south, we looked in the East Bay. We thought about leaving San Rafael. We thought about leaving Marin County. We looked at raw land, we looked at warehouses, and we kept coming back to the fact that we're an urban wildlife hospital and our location allows us to serve these animals and for people to find us. And as Brenda said in her lovely comments, the community comes to us, they visit us. We are a community asset and we're part of, this is our home. And I think we really just settled into the fact that we want to make this site work for ourselves. So to answer your question, it really is pretty consistent year in, year out. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. And now we are going to reopen the public hearing.
Right, so if anybody from City Hall would like to provide comment, or anybody on Zoom, press *9 or raise your hand. Seeing none.
Okay, so we're going to close the public hearing. And now we're going to go through the board members for their comments. And let's start over here. Jeff, do you want to go first? And again, pages 4 and 5, if you can address those items first and then go into other.
I probably want to address all of them, but I want to start by saying it's probably the most impressive conceptual set of drawings we've ever seen, but obviously you had to take it to that extent just to be able to present it. But this is more detailed than most of our formal applications by far. Obviously, it's a very impressive package. The site has a lot of very special challenges, the historic building, the incredible program that you have, the flooding. I'm surprised you came up with any solution at all, much less one that's creative as the one that you put in front of us. So those are my big comments. I'm glad to see the creeks being restored. It'd be nice if there's any room for any edge planting on the property, do try to do that. The CMU finishes, I thought that was pretty critical to the project. Because it is a lot of some kind of blankish walls, but obviously some of the ways to deal with that is changing colors and changing textures. So hopefully the difference between the two CMU blocks is enough to achieve that. It looks like it is with a small sample. I think it's a really nice sense of entry. Variation of height. I think that's fine. I think you've given a lot of attention to all the different facades. And it's just an unbelievably tough project, as I think you know already. But as far as the questions were on here, I thought you did a good job of addressing all of them. I'm not going to go through them one at a time. And those are my comments.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Don? You want to go next?
If the board will indulge me just a couple of minutes, I'd just like to say something before I start on my comments. This goes back probably 20 years now. And I lived on Peacock Gap Golf Course. And one evening, this loud thud in the side of the house. Of course, I ran outside and ready to scream at a golfer because I'm sure it was a Pro V1 hitting the side of my house. Little did I know there was a red-shouldered hawk had flown into a window in my upper story. And I have a either 6 or 7 year old son with bawling with tears. So we put together a box, a little pillowcase, we get the hawk in there. It's kind of moving around a little bit. Guess where we end up? Now, there was a young lady, I can't remember her name, spoke to us and spoke to my son. I don't know who was more upset, my son or the gal that helped us or myself. It's kind of bringing tears to my face a little bit, but she assured my son that you guys would do everything you could for that red-shouldered hawk. So we went away, and the next morning, and God, I hope he's not listening to this. I don't know what happened to that bird. I have no idea. But according the story my son got was that bird was alive and well and out there flying around over that golf course. And it made a big difference in his life. So whoever that volunteer was, I just want to say thank you. Now, I'd like to repeat everything Kent has said here. I think it was a fantastic job. I have no problem with the finishes. the two things I was concerned with is how much you're cramming into this site. I mean, it's very, very tight, and you got to keep that existing structure. I mean, for the work that you guys do, it'd be nice to go out and have a couple of acres somewhere. That'd be kind of nice too. And then the second thing I had concerns with is sort of this modern building set opposed to this historical structure. And at first, I thought it was kind of a stretch to go this far as this modern sort of era. But then I thought about it for a couple of days, and I thought maybe that modern building and those screens becomes this big backdrop. And maybe this historical structure will even glow a little more on the site. So I've kind of come around to accept that also. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stuart.
Yeah, thanks. I was really sad when I heard years ago from one of the architects that you guys were leaving. So I'm really super happy that you're staying. And I think looking at the site that was so challenging and what you've done to it, the minute I opened it, I just thought, looking at the rendering, I'm like, okay, this is really cool. I immediately thought this preservation of the structure, but going a different direction with the modern was actually a solid move, not just for the backdrop, but it kind of speaks to the function of what you do. And it looks like, okay, well, what is this, a church or like a gathering hall? No, it's Wildcare. And now when I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's Wildcare and they're serious. It's not just, these couple of cages that we walk in and I'm like, gee, I wish it was nicer. Well, you've done it. And they're right. I mean, this presentation is, I had to do a double take that it was a conceptual review. I mean, you guys should have just come in for a design review tonight and let us approve you and been on your way.
It's not allowed.
Huh?
Conceptual design review is required, unfortunately.
Oh. There's that code we need to change sometimes. We'll work on that. Got it. No, it's really wonderfully conceived. You've excelled at doing what you could with this site, and it looks like you thought about every single inch of it ad nauseum. You got an incredible team here already, so it looks like you didn't come in just half thinking about it. You've got WRA and animal habitats and geotechnical engineers. You guys had to make sure the site was going to work for you. And this is the result. So I've got nothing, the comments, I'm good with all of the colors and choices. I think they're appropriate for the use for sure. So I don't think, we're not trying to make something look residential and make it disappear, particularly on this site. So I think it's home run. And I don't think I've said that in 16 years on this board. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Stuart. Sharon, do you want to go next? Sure. Okay.
Well, I think your mission is incredible. And I think the concept is great. I have a couple of issues with that tall building next to the residential. And, you're a great neighbor to the animals. You got to be a great neighbor to the neighbors. And I think there's got to be a little bit more variation in those rear facades because they're next to single family homes. And you've got your loading dock on the back near a single family home. And where's the parking? I should have asked that question earlier.
So there is no parking on the site itself. So typically when people visit the site, they park along Albert Park Lane, which is public right of way. They've provided a parking analysis that basically shows that they're actually not intensifying, interestingly, in terms of parking numbers.
Okay.
They're basically doing the same thing that they're doing. They're proposing to do the same thing they're doing now, just with better facilities. So.
Okay, great. And I don't think a little color would hurt. I love the idea of the natural material, like it's like a rock, but there could be a natural palette too of, that could give a little bit more. I like the idea of a modern building near the old building. I'm not sure about where they meet there. They meet at a toilet in the front. So for me, I'm having a little bit of an issue of the meeting. I understand why you did it and probably had to squeeze it in, but is that the front face that you want to provide? And let's see, what other things did I say? I think that was it. I love the project and I think this with some tweaking, it'll be great. And I think the mission is like, fantastic. So I'm not negative on the project. I just like to tune it up a little bit.
Sorry, can I just confirm? So I heard you say you wanted more variation in the west facade, but I missed, I heard a suggestion in there, but I didn't quite catch it for what to do about it, or?
There could be color, there could be some changes, there could be a little give and take, a little in and out. And let me answer these questions. Yes, so you asked, does the west elevation benefit from additional articulation? I say yes to that. And I wondered about the courtyards in the floodplain, right? You're encroaching a little bit on the front.
We can't ask them questions.
Oh, right, okay. Sorry. And I think, let me look at my notes, and I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank
Chair.
you.
Last but not least.
Amazing Rubik's Cube of fitting all of this into the footprint that you have and working around a historical building. I concur with really what's being said. I also was going to bring up the west face, just thinking, is there something that can make it a little more interesting to the house? And I'm reminded, if you get off at the San Quentin exit when you're going on 580 and you go under the underpass, they have the large panels of seabirds and things like, is there something that speaks to the mission of the organization that could be a cast panel or something that could fill in some of the blank spaces on the back side, the west side of that building? The only other comment I had is if you could go back, if it's possible, to the rendering of the whole project.
Sure.
So I have a little bit of a concern of just the basic concrete because there's so many buildings in that industrial zone off of Anderson, from auto body shops to whatever, that have that raw concrete look. In this rendering, it looks lighter and there's not as much contrast from the cream of the historical building and the screening to the concrete. I personally would like to see the color all come down to be brighter and lighter, so it looks a little bit more special and a little less industrial. But I absolutely love the juxtaposition of the modern with the antique. And I'm reminded of how controversial it was for I.M. Pei when he proposed the entrance to the Louvre Museum in Paris. And then after that, the Pompidou Center was built. Now that makes Paris special, that juxtaposition of the modern and the antique. So I think that's brilliant. I would just like to see it look more like your rendering and a little bit less like, the concrete material. The other materials I love, actually.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. So I agree with the other board members who have said just what an amazing package, and the completeness and the professionalism with the way that it's been presented and thought through is really apparent, which is why I think you're getting concise comments, because there's a lot to comment on and a lot of thought went into the design. I personally love the idea of the modern piece as a backdrop to the historic structure. I think that's, there's a lot of good precedent for that, and I think it works well. I'm leaning towards the side on the CMU as presented, the west wall as presented. I think if it's truly a backdrop, then adding things like birds or more decoration actually, to me, kind of changes that design notion and makes it more of a feature and less of a backdrop. So I'm trying to resolve that. But overall, I think great presentation. I don't have any major comments. I do like the core 10 and the exposed concrete. It seems like you guys don't have any tagging issues, which is great because some of those materials are hard to remedy once they're damaged in that way. So I think this is just a think about coatings or other things if that ever did happen to preserve those materials. But those are my comments. And so I do think we had some difference in comments on the board, so maybe not consensus on all things. So I don't know, Jeff, if you want to take a stab at uniting that, or if we want to have some additional comment on the differences discussed. George?
Do we need consensus on a conceptual review, or do you want to boil the comments down?
Yeah.
Or does the applicant need any clarification on?
Yeah. I mean, I think I heard,
Maybe we could go through the board members one more time.
yeah, if you like. Sure.
Well, I just don't know if we need consensus on a conceptual review. We
We heard
don't,
we
because we're not
didn't,
taking an
yeah.
action.
So
I
something
was just
to
gonna say, I
consider.
like it as submitted.
Yeah, I do as well, so.
Agree.
Yeah, I heard for to not make any changes and to make changes to the west side. And then the only other thing was member Kent just asking if it was possible to add some more edge planting. Those were really the only.
Yeah, I mean, one
Sure.
comment in terms of the single family juxtaposition, I do appreciate that, but it's really hard when you have transitional zones. We have zoning that's changing right at that line. We have uses that are changing, people who bought those homes, and this is not being insensitive at all, but it's like, you know, if you buy a home that's sandwiched in between Albert Park and Wild Care and some industrial zones, I think you know what you bought. So I don't believe personally, unless I imagine if a neighbor and your neighborhood outreach seems like it's been incredible. If someone has some concerns, I'm sure we'll hear about it, and then we can, you know, you will probably try to resolve those concerns at that time. You're such a proactive applicant. I don't think you're going to turn your a blind eye to somebody with a concern. So I have a lot of confidence that you will address those items if they come up. They know you're doing this, that's for sure. But you know, it's hard, you know, it's like the people that came in here complaining about the Pacifics playing baseball in a baseball park when they were gonna bring the Pacifics in. It was kind of hard to swallow that you bought a house next to a ball field and we're upset that they were gonna play baseball at it. So it's just one of those things. All right.
Any other board comments? Okay, Jeff, do you want to try and summarize?
Sure. So yeah, again, the only change I heard was member Kent asking for possible more edge planting. I heard pretty unanimous like for the modern feel for the backdrop of the new building. I heard 3 voting members along with member Blaney indicate pretty much, you know, keep it as it is, that the concerns raised in the staff report, or rather questions raised in the staff report, that the applicant sufficiently addressed those. And then I heard from members Alexin and Kowalski to see if there would be possibility to make some changes to that, particularly that west elevation.
Okay. Is there a motion? And we don't need a motion? Okay, so there's no motion. Okay. So with that, we will let's see. Do we need to move to the director's report? Okay.
Sure. I think the only thing I want to mention was the Northgate Town Square project came before the Planning Commission last week. And so that was a study session where the Planning Commission provided input on a number of things in terms of the affordable housing piece, the overall sort of layout of buildings and the mix of units, the park. And so Planning Commission, it was quite a robust meeting. I think it was over 3 hours. And so the applicant is taking that into consideration, and they do intend to come back to the design review board sometime in the spring, possibly February or March. So.
And then our next meeting, our next scheduled meeting is, you know of, that we have items?
Yes, well, we don't have anything technically scheduled, but we do not have the December 20th meeting, and the January 3rd meeting is canceled. So if we do have a meeting in January, it would be the 18th. 18th.
And are we rotating officers at that time for the year? Are we up to that
Right,
point?
so we'll be doing the annual report during that meeting. And that will include, changes in the chair. Yes.
This might be your last meeting.
All right.
Wow,
That's
good
great. That
job.
was a good meeting. Are there any other board communications to staff at this time? Okay.
Should we tell Foster that to leave?
Well, sure. I mean, I think we're about to adjourn the meeting, but.
There was only one item. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
Good show. You're in good hands. You got a real good team.
I'll see you tomorrow. Great job.
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing that.
Or
Nice to
MTV.
meet you. Oh, that'd be great, actually. Yeah. I'm gonna have. So we'll be in touch. Yeah, yeah. Come meet Allison. Allison?
Yeah, we want to help. So it'll be,
Yes. And then. Same contact. Thank you. Right here. And we would love to. Thank you. So I really was looking forward to it back then, and now I'm looking forward to it again. Thank you so much.
Sure.